So, India's criminal laws have a brand new name, the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, or BNS. But it's more than just a new name. It really makes you wonder about something fundamental. If you cause harm to someone, does that automatically make you a criminal? In this explainer, we're going to break down that very fine line the BNS draws between an act that causes harm and an act that's actually a crime.
I mean, really think about it for a second. Is a surgeon who makes a tragic mistake during an operation the same as a cold-blooded murderer? Of course not. Or what about a car accident versus a getaway driver deliberately running someone down? The law has to draw a line somewhere, and India's new criminal code, the BNS, is very clear. Not every harmful act is a crime.
And here's exactly how the law draws that line. It all boils down to two core ideas. To prove a crime, you almost always need two things: the actus reus, which is just a fancy term for the guilty act itself, and the mens rea, the guilty mind. You see, it's that combination of the action and the intention that really makes something a crime. And that one principle, it's the foundation for everything we're about to talk about.
Okay, so what about those situations where, yes, a harmful act happened, but that crucial guilty mind was missing? How does the BNS handle that? Well, the answer is in a really important part of the code called the general exceptions. Think of it as the official rulebook for when a harmful act is legally excused.
The general exceptions are kind of like the law's built-in context clauses. They're a specific set of circumstances that basically tell the court, whoa, hold on a second, there's a lot more to the story here. They give a legal path to excuse an act that, on the surface, looks like it should be criminal.
Just look at the huge difference the BNS makes right here. A mistake of fact can be a perfectly valid excuse. Let's say you genuinely believed an umbrella was yours when you picked it up. That's not theft. But a mistake of law? That's a whole different story. You can't just claim you didn't know stealing was illegal. That'll never get you off the hook. Same goes for a pure accident. If you're doing something lawful and something goes wrong by sheer misfortune, the law gets that there is no criminal intent.
The law also carves out exceptions for people who simply lack the mental capacity to form a guilty mind in the first place. This includes people with severe mental illness, very young children, and this is so important, people who are involuntarily intoxicated. That word involuntary is key. If you choose to get drunk and do something wrong, that's on you. But if someone drugs you against your will, the law sees that in a completely different light. The BNS also has justifications for certain acts. For example, you might be excused if you cause a small harm to prevent a much bigger one, or if you're forced to do something because your life is being threatened. The law even has a sort of get-over-it clause for harms that are so minor a reasonable person wouldn't even complain. But all of these are really just the opening act for the biggest justification of all. And that is the right of private defense. This is one of the most powerful and basic principles in all of criminal law. It recognizes our fundamental human instinct for self-preservation. The BNS lays out, in detail, when and how you can protect yourself, other people, and your property.
And the scope of this right is probably wider than you think. It's not just about saving your own skin. The BNA says you have the right to defend your property, sure, but also the body of another person, and even that person's property. But, and this is a huge but, this powerful right comes with some very strict rules.
Here's where the limits, or the guardrails, come in. First, the threat has to be happening right now. You can't claim self-defense if you had plenty of time to call the police for help. Second, and this is the big one, your response must be proportional. You can only use as much force as is reasonably necessary to stop the threat. This idea of proportionality is what separates legitimate self-defense from illegal vigilantism.
So, when does proportional force mean you can actually use lethal force? Well, the law is very specific. It's only allowed when you're defending a person from the absolute worst kinds of violence, things like an assault that makes you fear for your life, or rape, kidnapping, or an acid attack.
You might be surprised to see that this right can even extend to defending property. But look at the situations: robbery, breaking into a house at night, setting a home on fire. Why? Because these crimes aren't just about things. They carry an immediate and serious threat to human life. The law recognizes that in those moments, you're not just defending your stuff, you're defending the people inside.
All right, so we've spent a lot of time on when you're not guilty for a harmful act. Now let's totally flip the script. When are you guilty of a crime that you didn't even physically commit yourself? This is where we get into the ideas of abetment and conspiracy.
Abetment is pretty much the crime of helping a crime.
The BNS breaks it down into 3 simple actions. 1, you can instigate it, basically encouraging someone to do it. 2, you can conspire, which means planning it with them. And 3, you can intentionally aid them, like being the getaway driver. If you do any of these, the law says you're just as guilty as the person who did the final deed.
And check this out. The BNS has a really long reach. The law is crystal clear. If you are sitting anywhere in the world and you help a crime happen inside India, you can be prosecuted under Indian law. Basically, physical borders are no shield from justice. Now, conspiracy has a little legal twist that's really important. If you and your buddy agree to commit a crime, say a robbery, the very moment you make that agreement, you've both committed the crime of conspiracy. But what if you agree to do something legal, like winning a business contract, but you plan to use illegal means, like bribery? In that case, the agreement itself isn't enough. The prosecutor has to prove that one of you actually took a step, an overt act, like offering the bribe, to make the conspiracy stick.
Okay, last big topic. What about failure? What happens if you try to commit a crime but you mess it up? Well, the BNS is clear on this too. Trying to commit a crime is still a crime. The law punishes your intention, even if you didn't get the result you wanted. And the BNS has a pretty straightforward formula for this. As a general rule of thumb, the maximum punishment for attempting a crime is 1/2 of the longest sentence you could have gotten for actually succeeding. It creates a really logical and proportional system. Let's make that real with a quick example. The max punishment for theft is 3 years. So if you attempt a theft but you fail, maybe you get caught before you grab anything, you can still face up to 1.5 years in prison. It just goes to show the law is focused on your criminal intent, not just your success rate.
So when you put all of these pieces together, from honest mistakes to acts of self-defense, from helping a crime to just trying to commit one, you see that the BNS creates this incredibly detailed framework. And these aren't just technicalities or loopholes. They are the absolute bedrock of a fair and just system.
Ultimately, what all of these rules really show is a system trying to perform a very difficult balancing act. It's about balancing accountability for our actions with a sense of fairness. And it does that by focusing on that one critical element, the guilty mind. The whole point is to punish malice, not just misfortune.
And that really leaves us with one final big question. These laws represent our society's best attempt to find that perfect balance, but the conversation is never really over. It constantly forces us to ask, where should we, as a society, draw the line between a valid excuse and true accountability?